In the gleaming halls of River Heights Mall, where price tags often dictate worth, a 15-year-old girl in a carefully pinned thrift store dress dares to dream bigger than her bank account. But when privilege and prejudice collide with hidden truths, a simple act of mockery sets off a chain reaction that will force everyone, from a teenage bully to a fashion empire queen, to face what lies beneath their perfectly curated facades. Jasmine Taylor smoothed down her thrift store dress as she walked into River Heights Mall, head held high despite the small tear in the hem she'd carefully pinned that morning. At 15, she'd already mastered the art of making secondhand clothes look fashionable, a skill born of necessity after her mother lost her job at the bank and they moved in with her grandmother. The mall buzzed with Saturday afternoon energy, filled with groups of teenagers clutching shopping bags from stores Jasmine could only window shop. She was here for a different reason, an interview at the mall's new bookstore cafe. The manager had sounded impressed by her straight-A record and the recommendation from her English teacher. This job could help her mother with bills and maybe, just maybe, let her save a little for the dance team uniform she desperately wanted. "Oh, my God!" A sharp voice cut through the ambient mall noise. "Look what just walked in from the Goodwill runway." Jasmine recognized that voice. Madison Wheeler, whose father owned half the car dealerships in town. Madison, who never wore the same designer outfit twice. Madison, who'd transferred to Riverbrook Prep last year, but still managed to make Jasmine's life at the public high school miserable through social media and chance encounters like this. "I think I saw that dress on my grandmother's couch," Madison stage whispered to her friends, who circled like perfectly coordinated sharks in their matching boutique outfits. The actual couch, not just the fabric. Jasmine felt her cheeks burn, but kept walking. She'd learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Her grandmother's words echoed in her head. "Your dignity is not determined by their ignorance." What Jasmine didn't notice was the woman sitting at the juice bar, perfectly positioned to observe the entire scene. Vanessa Chen, newly appointed creative director of Style House, one of the largest fashion retailers in the country, sipped her green smoothie thoughtfully. She'd been in town scouting locations for their new flagship store, but suddenly found herself far more interested in the human drama unfolding before her. As Madison's group followed Jasmine, their laughter drawing looks from other shoppers, Vanessa noticed something they'd missed. The thrift store dress the girl wore had been expertly altered, its silhouette subtly adjusted to mimic this season's latest trends. The carefully placed safety pin at the hem wasn't hiding a tear. It was creating a deliberate drape that any fashion student would recognize as advanced technique. "And what is that thing in her hair?" Madison's voice carried across the atrium. "Did she make it out of rubber bands?" Actually, Vanessa realized, the girl's hair accessory was a clever reproduction of a piece from her company's upcoming spring collection, one that hadn't even been released yet. This young woman hadn't just styled herself on a budget. She'd anticipated future trends using nothing but creativity and skill. Inside the bookstore cafe, manager Sarah O'Neill was already impressed by Jasmine's resume, but it was the girl's composed demeanor, despite the obvious harassment, that caught her attention. Sarah had her own history with Madison Wheeler and her family, a history that had cost her a previous job and taught her hard lessons about power and privilege in their small town. Madison and her friends planted themselves at a table directly in the cafe's line of sight, making exaggerated gestures every time Jasmine spoke during her interview. But there was something brittle in Madison's laughter, something almost desperate in her need to tear down this poised young woman who somehow managed to look elegant in secondhand clothes. What none of them knew was that Theodore Wheeler, Madison's father, was also watching from the second floor. He'd been following his daughter at a distance lately, concerned about changes in her behavior since his wife's illness had returned. The cruelty he witnessed now reminded him too much of the bullies who'd tormented his own sister decades ago, before she'd taken her life in high school. History seemed to be repeating itself, but this time he was on the other side, parent to the bully rather than sibling to the bullied. Vanessa Chen pulled out her phone and began making calls. The location scouting for Style House's new store could wait. She had a different kind of project in mind, one that might teach more valuable lessons than any corporate expansion. The story was about to take an unexpected turn, but fate had even more players to bring onto the stage. Because walking through the mall's main entrance right at that moment was someone else who understood both sides of this situation all too well. Someone whose own path from privilege to compassion might hold the key to breaking cycles of hurt and judgment. Maya Richardson walked into the mall with a confident stride of someone who'd graced magazine covers, but her keen eyes missed nothing. The former supermodel turned philanthropist had built her foundation on the belief that fashion should empower, not exclude. She'd experienced both sides of the industry, from homeless teens stealing clothes for job interviews to international fashion icon. And now she was here to meet with Vanessa Chen about Style House's community initiative. What she witnessed stopped her in her tracks. "I bet she made those shoes from old tires," Madison sneered, her voice carrying across the atrium. Her friends laughed on cue, but Maya noticed one of them, a redhead named Emma, winced slightly at the comment. In the cafe, Jasmine's interview was wrapping up. Sarah O'Neill had already decided to hire her, impressed by both her qualifications and her dignity under fire. But something in the girl's careful movements, the way she'd meticulously maintained her second-hand clothes, reminded Sarah of her own daughter's struggle with poverty after the divorce. "Your hair, by the way," Sarah said softly. "That's a beautiful style. Very creative." Jasmine touched the carefully crafted accessory, a small smile breaking through her composed facade. "Thank you. I make them. It helps me practice for when I can afford design school." Theodore Wheeler leaned against the second-floor railing, his knuckles white. Madison's laughter below sounded just like her mother's had, before cancer humbled them both, before the treatments drained their savings, before they'd started hiding their own financial struggles behind a facade of luxury and meanness. Vanessa Chen was already typing on her tablet, arranging meetings, setting plans in motion. But it was Maya who saw what everyone else had missed, the way Madison's hands trembled when she reached for her designer bag, the slight puff around her eyes suggesting recent tears, the brittleness of her smile. "That bag's fake," Madison announced as Jasmine emerged from her interview. "Probably got it from a street vendor. My dad says those people are all entrepreneurs making the best of limited opportunities?" Maya's voice cut through the atrium like silk over steel. Every head turned toward her, recognition dawning on faces. Maya Richardson was hard to miss, her famous vitiligo making her skin a beautiful canvas of contrasts, her presence both regal and approachable. Madison froze mid-sentence, color draining from her face. 2 years ago, she'd attended one of Maya's fashion camps for underprivileged teens, not as a student, but as her mother's chosen charity case for social media coverage. What no one knew was how that week had affected her, how she'd seen genuine joy in girls who had nothing but creativity and determination. Vanessa Chen stood, smoothie forgotten. This was better than anything she could have orchestrated. Maya Richardson's involvement could transform a moment of cruelty into something revolutionary. Theodore Wheeler moved toward the escalator, his heart pounding. He recognized Maya, too. She'd been the keynote speaker at a charity gala where his wife had made her last public appearance, where she'd whispered to him about wanting Madison to learn kindness before it was too late. But it was Emma, Madison's red-headed friend, who acted first. Slipping away from the group, she approached Jasmine with tears in her eyes. "I'm wearing a fake too," she confessed quietly. "Everything I'm wearing is fake. My dad lost his job at Mr. Wheeler's dealership last month. I've been pretending because I was scared Madison would." The mall seemed to hold its breath. In that suspended moment, lives teetered on the edge of change. Maya and Vanessa exchanged knowing looks. Sarah O'Neill stepped out of the cafe, phone already recording. Theodore Wheeler reached the bottom of the escalator, his daughter's name on his lips, and Jasmine, who'd faced ridicule with quiet grace, found herself at the center of a story much bigger than a torn dress or a cruel comment. Because sometimes the universe conspires to turn moments of shame into opportunities for transformation, if only everyone involved has the courage to embrace the change. "Madison?" Theodore Wheeler's voice carried a gentleness that made his daughter stiffen. "We need to tell them." Madison's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. "Dad, don't. Your mother's medical bills came today," he continued, moving closer to the group. "The insurance denied the experimental treatment. We're selling the house next week. The dealerships, they're not doing well either." The mall's ambient noise seemed to fade away as Madison's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Her Her designer bag, a real one, but possibly her last, slipped from her shoulder. Maya Richardson stepped forward, her presence commanding yet compassionate. "Shame," she said softly, "is a heavy dress to wear. Trust me, I know. I spent 2 years living in my car before my first modeling contract, stealing clothes from donation bins to look presentable at auditions." Vanessa Chen had moved closer to Jasmine, studying the young girl's handiwork with professional interest. "This isn't just altered clothing," she announced. "This is art. The way you've reconstructed these pieces, I've seen design school graduates with less talent." Emma's confession had sparked a quiet revolution. 2 other girls from Madison's group stepped forward, sharing their own stories of hidden financial struggles and keeping up appearances. The facade of privilege was cracking, revealing the vulnerable humanity beneath. "I didn't know," Madison whispered, looking at her friends with new eyes. I was so afraid of anyone finding out about Mom, about everything." Tears smeared her expensive mascara. Sarah O'Neill emerged from the cafe with a stack of applications. "I have 5 positions open," she announced, "and I don't care what brand of clothes you wear to work." But it was Jasmine who transformed the moment from breakdown to breakthrough. Opening her worn backpack, she pulled out a sketchbook full of designs, clothes reimagined from thrift store finds, adaptations of high fashion made accessible for every budget. "I've been sketching your outfits," she said to Madison, her voice steady. "Not to copy them, but to redesign them, to make them possible for everyone to wear. Even this dress." She smoothed her skirt. "It's inspired by the one your mom wore to the cancer benefit last spring. I saw it in the newspaper and thought it was beautiful." Madison stared at the sketch, recognizing her mother's favorite dress, the last one she'd worn before the cancer returned. But Jasmine's version was cleverly reconstructed, showing how to achieve the same elegance with simpler materials. "That's more than inspiration," Maya observed, studying the sketches. "That's innovation." She turned to Vanessa. "Remember what we discussed about Style House's community program?" Vanessa was already nodding, her mind racing with possibilities. But Theodore Wheeler spoke first, his voice thick with emotion. "Before she got sick again," he said, "your mother started a project, a foundation to help young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds. The paperwork is still sitting in my office. She wanted to call it Style Without Borders." The mall's security cameras captured an extraordinary scene. A former supermodel, a fashion executive, a bookstore manager, a car dealership owner, and a group of teenage girls from different worlds, all gathered around a worn sketchbook held by a young girl in a second-hand dress. But the story wasn't finished, because walking through the mall entrance was someone else, a familiar figure whose arrival would add another layer to this unfolding drama of transformation. Someone whose own journey from judgment to understanding would help bridge the final gaps between these colliding worlds. Through the mall's entrance walked Diana Wheeler, Madison's mother, her head wrapped in a designer scarf that couldn't quite hide the effects of chemotherapy. She leaned on her nurse's arm, determined to surprise her daughter with a rare good day. What she witnessed made her stop in her tracks. "The foundation papers," she said, her voice weak but clear. "You finally told them, Theo?" Madison spun around, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, you're supposed to be resting." "Sometimes," Diana said, moving slowly toward the group. "We rest too long in our pride." Her eyes fixed on Jasmine's dress, recognition flickering across her face. "That's my benefit gown. You've reconstructed it beautifully." Jasmine straightened, stunned by the praise. "I saw you in it on TV. You spoke about how fashion should unite, not divide." "Words I forgot to teach my own daughter," Diana replied softly, reaching for Madison's hand. "Until cancer reminded me what really matters." Maya Richardson stepped forward, her unique skin catching the mall's fluorescent lights. "Diana Wheeler, we met at the Fashion Forward charity event last year. You mentioned wanting to start something revolutionary." "Style Without Borders," Diana nodded. "But then the cancer returned, and I lost my courage along with my hair." She touched her scarf self-consciously. Vanessa Chen was already pulling up documents on her tablet. "Style House has been looking to partner with a grassroots foundation, one that understands both sides of the fashion world, the creativity and the exclusion." Sarah O'Neill watched the scene unfold, remembering how Diana Wheeler had secretly paid her legal fees during her divorce 3 years ago, when she'd lost everything. Some acts of kindness stay hidden until the right moment. Emma, still wiping tears, pulled out her phone and showed everyone her secret Instagram account, filled with clothing redesigns and thrift store transformations, much like Jasmine's, but hiding behind a pseudonym out of fear of judgment. "There are more of us," she said. "So many more. We've all been pretending to be something we're not." Diana Wheeler sank into a nearby chair, fatigue evident, but her eyes bright with purpose. That's what Style Without Borders was meant to be about, breaking down the walls we build with labels and price tags. But I never imagined... She gestured at the unlikely group gathered around her daughter's tears washing away layers of pretense, Jasmine's dignity shining brighter than any designer label, Maya's successful fusion of fashion and philanthropy, Vanessa's corporate influence ready to be redirected. "Sometimes," Maya said, "the universe conspires to bring the right people together at the right moment." But as the group began to discuss possibilities, a commotion near the mall entrance drew their attention. Someone else was arriving, someone whose presence would challenge their newfound unity and force them to prove whether their transformation was genuine or merely a momentary impulse. The evening news crews were already setting up outside, having caught wind of Maya Richardson's presence at the mall. Social media was buzzing with snippets of what had transpired. In the midst of it all, Diana Wheeler pulled Jasmine aside. "There's something else you need to see," she said, reaching for her purse. "Something I've been carrying since that benefit gala. Something that might change everything." From her purse, Diana withdrew a yellowed fashion magazine from 25 years ago. Her hands trembled as she opened it to a dog-eared page showing a young black woman wearing a hand-modified designer dress. The caption read, "Rose Taylor wins Underground Fashion Innovation Award." "Your grandmother," Diana said softly. "I knew I recognized your techniques. Rose Taylor was legendary in the underground fashion scene before she disappeared. She took thrift store clothes and turned them into runway-worthy pieces. I studied her work in design school before I chose wealth over passion." Jasmine stared at the photograph, her heart pounding. Her grandmother had never mentioned this part of her past. The woman who'd raised her since her mother's job loss, who'd taught her to sew and hold her head high, had been a fashion pioneer. The commotion at the mall entrance grew louder. Local news reporter Christine Zhang pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand, but she stopped short when she saw Diana Wheeler. "Mrs. Wheeler," Christine's voice softened, "I didn't expect... 20 years ago, you gave me my first designer outfit for my job interview at this very station. You said presentation shouldn't stand in the way of talent." Madison looked at her mother with new eyes. How many secret kindnesses had Diana Wheeler performed before cancer stripped away her facade of social superiority? Maya Richardson was already on her phone, pulling up archives. Rose Taylor's work influenced an entire generation of guerrilla fashion designers. Her sudden disappearance was never explained. "The industry wasn't ready," a new voice said. Rose Taylor herself stood at the edge of the group, still wearing her custodian's uniform from her job at Riverbrook High School. "But maybe now it is." Jasmine ran to her grandmother, questions burning in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," Rose said, touching the magazine photo of her younger self, "I wanted you to find your own way, to create without the weight of my history. But, watching you today..." She turned to face the group. "Sometimes our secrets keep us from our purpose." Vanessa Chen's tablet chimed with urgent messages from Style House Corporate. The story was spreading across social media. Esker Style, Without Borders was trending. Their marketing team wanted to capitalize on the moment. But Diana Wheeler, despite her weakness, stood up. "This isn't about marketing. This is about redemption, about all the times I chose status over substance, about what I've allowed my daughter to become." Madison stepped forward, her designer heels clicking on the mall floor. She faced Jasmine and the growing crowd, tears streaming down her face. "I'm wearing a fake," she announced loudly. "Everything about me has been fake. My clothes, my attitude, my life. The real Madison Wheeler is terrified. Her mother is dying, her family is broke, and she's been horrible to people who have more talent and grace than she could ever hope to have." The mall fell silent. Camera phones recorded every word. Christine Zhang signaled her cameraman to keep rolling. Then Rose Taylor did something unexpected. She removed her custodian's jacket to reveal a stunning blouse beneath, clearly handmade, but with such skill, it could have graced any runway. Fashion isn't about labels, she said. It's about transformation, about taking what you have and making it beautiful, about seeing possibility where others see poverty. Maya Richardson nodded, understanding flowing between these women who had all, in their own ways, been shaped by society's expectations and judgments. But before anyone could respond, another figure pushed through the crowd, someone whose arrival would force everyone to confront the true cost of redemption and test whether this moment of understanding could survive the harsh light of reality. Patricia Montgomery, editor-in-chief of Elite Fashion magazine, strode through the crowd in 6-inch Louboutins. She was the one who had blacklisted Rose Taylor 25 years ago, who had written the scathing editorial that forced an innovative black designer into hiding. Well, Patricia's voice cut through the silence. Rose Taylor, still turning rags into knockoffs, I see. But the mall of 2024 was not the fashion world of 1999. Before Rose could respond, Diana Wheeler struggled to her feet. You're right, Patricia. She is still transforming rags into something beautiful, just like she transformed me. Diana pulled out another magazine, this one showing a teenage Diana Watson before she became Mrs. Wheeler, wearing a modified thrift store dress to her first society event. Rose made this dress when my family couldn't afford one. She never told anyone it was me in that photo spread, never exposed that the debutante's designer gown came from Goodwill. Madison gasped, recognizing the dress. It hung in their home's gallery of her mother's finest fashion moments. All these years, she'd bragged about the vintage Dior, never knowing its true origin. Maya Richardson stepped forward, her presence commanding respect even from Patricia Montgomery. I'm curious, Patricia. Did you blacklist Rose because her designs weren't good enough, or because she proved that high fashion could be accessible to everyone? Christine Zhang's camera caught Patricia's flinch. The reporter who'd once received a life-changing outfit from Diana Wheeler recognized a story that could change lives. Do you know what happens to the fashion industry if everyone can look expensive? Patricia demanded. If any talented teenager with a sewing machine can reproduce runway looks? They might learn their worth isn't determined by a price tag, Jasmine spoke up, her voice clear and strong. They might stop judging each other based on labels. Vanessa Chen was rapidly typing on her tablet. Stylehouse's board was divided, some seeing the marketing potential, others fearing Patricia Montgomery's influence. But then Emma stepped forward, phone in hand, showing her thrift store fashion blogs, follower count climbing as the story spread. It's already happening, Emma said. Thousands of us, sharing techniques, teaching each other. We're not killing fashion, we're making it live. Theodore Wheeler moved to support his wife, who was trembling with fatigue but glowing with purpose. The foundation launches today, he announced. Style Without Borders, with Rose Taylor as creative director. Patricia Montgomery's face reddened. You can't... Actually, Maya interrupted, we can. Because there's something else you should know about that day you blacklisted Rose. She nodded to her assistant, who handed her a thick folder. Something about who really designed the collection you claimed was borrowed from your fashion house. The mall held its breath as Maya opened the folder, but before she could reveal its contents, another voice rang out. One that would shift the story's direction one final time. That collection was mine, came a weathered voice from behind Patricia. Eleanor Montgomery, Patricia's mother and former design legend, rolled her wheelchair through the parting crowd. I sold it to Rose Taylor before I got sick, before you took over my magazine and rewrote my legacy. Patricia's perfectly made-up face went pale. Mother, you're confused. The doctors said, I'm dying, Patricia, not senile. Eleanor's voice carried decades of authority. Rose bought my final collection fair and square when I needed money for treatment. She didn't steal anything. You're the one who stole my magazine, my reputation, and this talented woman's future. The mall erupted in whispers. Christine Zhang's camera captured every moment as Eleanor Montgomery pulled a folded piece of paper from her lap blanket. A yellowed bill of sale with both her signature and Rose Taylor's. I've carried this shame for 25 years, Eleanor continued, watching my daughter destroy a brilliant designer's career to protect her own position. Watching fashion become a weapon instead of the art form I loved. Diana Wheeler sank into a nearby chair, her own illness making her especially sympathetic to Eleanor's confession. Madison knelt beside her mother, designer dress sweeping the mall floor, finally understanding the true cost of pride. Jasmine stood quietly beside her grandmother, watching Rose Taylor's shoulders straighten as decades of vindication washed over her. The teenage girl who'd been mocked for her clothes just hours ago now stood at the center of a moment that could transform an industry. Maya Richardson's phone was buzzing constantly. Other fashion houses were calling, sensing the shift in the zeitgeist. Vanessa Chen had already drafted a preliminary contract for Style House's partnership with the nascent Style Without Borders Foundation. But it was Emma who captured the moment's true significance. Her live stream of the events had gone viral, with hundreds of thousands of young people sharing their own stories of fashion-based discrimination and creative resilience. The real theft, Eleanor Montgomery announced, her voice carrying despite her weakness, wasn't of designs. It was of opportunity, of dignity, of the simple joy of feeling beautiful regardless of your bank account. Patricia Montgomery stood frozen, watching her carefully constructed world crumble. The designer labels she wore suddenly seemed to weigh on her like chains. Then Rose Taylor did something unexpected. She walked over to Patricia, pulled a simple measuring tape from her pocket, and held it out like an olive branch. "I forgave you years ago," Rose said softly. "Anger only traps us in ugly patterns. Maybe it's time we designed something new. Together?" The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on anyone. The measuring tape, a humble tool that had helped Rose transform countless thrift store finds into works of art, now offered a chance to measure something more valuable than fabric. But just as Patricia reached for the tape, another figure stepped out of the crowd, someone whose presence would force everyone to confront an even deeper truth about fashion, power, and the real meaning of style. James Montgomery, Patricia's teenage son, stepped forward in clothes that made his mother gasp: thrifted jeans, a reconstructed jacket, and a t-shirt he'd clearly modified himself. His Instagram handle, Thrift Prince, displayed proudly across the back. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking but determined, "I'm one of Emma's followers. I've been secretly learning from Rose Taylor's old techniques for months, the same ones you called cheap imitations." Patricia staggered slightly, recognizing her son's jacket as one she'd thrown away last season. He'd transformed it completely, adding elements that echoed both vintage streetwear and current haute couture. "When you said I couldn't pursue fashion design because it wasn't prestigious enough," James continued, "I started sneaking into community design classes, the ones at the center near Grandma's nursing home, the ones Rose Taylor teaches every Saturday." Eleanor Montgomery's tired face lit up with recognition. The quiet boy in the back row, always working with repurposed materials. "I knew there was something familiar about your eye for color." Rose Taylor nodded slowly. "He has your original touch, Eleanor, and his mother's precision. But something else too, something entirely his own." Madison Wheeler, still kneeling beside her mother, saw something of herself in James's revelation. "How long?" she asked him. "How long have you been hiding who you really are?" "Since I was 12, James replied, gaining confidence. "Since I heard Mom tell her board members that real fashion couldn't come from discount stores. That same day, I saw a girl at school crying because someone like me, someone privileged, had mocked her clothes. I decided then that if I ever had the chance to change things." The mall's security cameras caught the moment Patricia Montgomery's carefully maintained facade cracked completely. She looked at her son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. Diana Wheeler, despite her fatigue, stood again. "We've all been guilty of it, Patricia, using fashion to build walls instead of bridges, teaching our children to judge worth by labels. I did it to Madison. You did it to James. But look at them now. They're showing us a better way." Vanessa Chen's tablet chimed again. Style House's board had reached a unanimous decision, influenced by the overwhelming social media response to Emma's live stream. But before she could announce it, Christine Zhang stepped forward with her own revelation. 20 years ago, the reporter said, when Diana Wheeler gave me that interview outfit, there was another woman in the store, someone who helped adjust the fit when I couldn't afford alterations." She looked at Patricia. "It was you." The mall fell silent as Patricia Montgomery's hands flew to her mouth, remembering. Back before she'd taken over the magazine, before she'd hardened her heart against anything that threatened her vision of high fashion. James crossed the space between them, his modified jacket catching the light. "Mom, Grandma's been showing me her old journals about how fashion used to be before it became about exclusion, about how you used to help people feel beautiful, no matter what they could afford." Eleanor Montgomery pulled another paper from her lap blanket, a faded photograph that would reveal one final truth about the relationship between fashion, family, and redemption. The photograph showed a teenage Patricia Montgomery wearing a reconstructed dress, beaming beside a young Rose Taylor at a community fashion show. On the back, in faded ink, "Patricia and Rose, First Prize, Sustainable Fashion Innovation, 1989. "You were my first student," Rose said softly. "Before the magazine, before the labels became chains around your heart, you understood then what fashion could be." Patricia's carefully constructed walls crumbled completely. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of losing everything I'd built, afraid of not being enough. I turned that fear into power over others, into judgment, into exactly what you once fought against," Eleanor finished, reaching for her daughter's hand. Vanessa Chen stepped forward, her tablet displaying Stylehouse's decision. "We're launching a new division, Style Without Borders, with full funding and creative control. But we don't want just one creative director. We want a council that represents every voice in this story." Diana Wheeler, supported by her daughter Madison, smiled through her fatigue. "A place where high fashion meets accessibility, where creativity isn't limited by price tags. Where my grandmother's legacy can finally bloom," Jasmine added, holding Rose's hand. The announcement went viral instantly. Emma's live stream had reached millions, spawning a movement of young designers sharing their own stories of transformation, both of clothes and of hearts. James Montgomery hugged his mother, his reconstructed jacket a bridge between their worlds. "We can change it, Mom. All of it. Together." Madison removed her designer shoes, standing barefoot on the mall floor. "I want to learn," she said to Jasmine. "Really learn, not just about clothes, but about seeing people, really seeing them." Over the next year, Style Without Borders grew beyond anyone's expectations. Rose Taylor's community classes expanded nationwide, with Patricia Montgomery often teaching alongside her, both women healing old wounds through shared wisdom. Diana Wheeler lived to see the Foundation's first fashion show, where models of all backgrounds wore designs that proved beauty knows no tax bracket. Her daughter Madison and Jasmine co-designed a collection that brought tears to even the most hardened fashion critics' eyes. Eleanor Montgomery's final contribution to fashion wasn't her legendary designs, but the truth that helped rebuild her daughter's soul. She passed peacefully 6 months later, watching James debut his first collection, Bridge the Gap, on her hospital room TV. The mall where it all began became home to the first Style Without Borders workshop, where Christine Zhang filmed a documentary about transformation, not just of clothes, but of hearts and minds. Emma's social media influence grew into a global movement promoting fashion accessibility and creativity without judgment. And in a perfect culmination, 1 year later, Jasmine Taylor stood on stage accepting the Future of Fashion Award, wearing a dress she and Madison had designed together. Half haute couture, half thrift store finds. Wholly revolutionary. In the audience, Rose Taylor sat beside Patricia Montgomery, both women wiping away tears as Jasmine spoke. "Style isn't about what we can afford. It's about who we dare to become. Every piece of clothing tells a story. Make sure yours tells the truth." The security cameras that had once captured cruel mockery now recorded daily scenes of collaboration, as people from all walks of life came together to learn, create, and transform, not just fabric, but the very fabric of society. And somewhere in that mall, Jasmine's original thrift store dress hangs in a glass case, beside Madison's designer outfit from that day. A permanent reminder that sometimes the most beautiful designs come from transforming not just clothes, but ourselves.